Do y'all have any personal stories with cryptids? One night, my girlfriend, her sister, and I were driving through a rural area to pick up her sister's boyfriend. Out of nowhere, something shot across the road in front of us. It looked like a Leakin from Underworld, with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce right through us. It was fast, so fast that it felt like we were moving in slow motion. At first, I thought it was a wild hog or maybe a bear, but it was too slender, too uniquely shaped. We were in a Tahoe, elevated, and this thing was at eye level with us, standing around 6 to 7 feet tall. Its long, muscular arms and neck, those massive shoulders, and those oddly proportioned hind legs like a giant dog. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. We all just stared at each other, yelling, "What the hell was that?" The shock hit us hard, and it wasn't until we got home that we started piecing it together. I've seen every animal in Arkansas, and I can tell you, there's no mistaking this for anything out there. It was real, and it was terrifying.
I saw a ghost once and it was wild.
I was at my cousin's house, which is over 200 years old and has a history of ghost sightings. So, I'm babysitting with my sister, and after the kids are asleep, we're just chilling in the living room, chatting on the phone. Suddenly, my cousin's dog goes nuts, barking and scratching at the door. I didn't think much of it because he's a bit of a maniac. Then, out of nowhere, I see this figure behind my sister in the kitchen. It looked like a person but was all foggy. I freaked out and told her, but she thought I was joking. A few minutes later, my aunt came home, and we left. I didn't think about it again until the last day of summer. My sister was at a friend's house, and I had to drop something off. On the way, I saw that same ghost again. This time it turned its head and looked right at me before disappearing. I was completely shaken, and my mom could tell something was off. I told her what happened, and she actually believed me. It was one of those moments that just sticks with you.
Last Sunday morning,
While driving through Butler County, Ohio, I spotted something unusual just off the bridge. It was about 10 to 15 feet away, gliding effortlessly, not flapping its wings like a bird. It stood around 3 feet tall, green and reptilian in appearance. My first thought, a flying dragon. Now, I know dragons aren't real, but this creature reminded me of the xianglong, an extinct gliding lizard from China. The xianglong was only about 6 inches long, making my sighting even more bizarre. Could it be a large adult version? But that doesn't add up, since adults don't grow that much bigger. I considered the possibility of it being a bird, but nothing in Ohio matches its size and color. A drone crossed my mind, but it was too low and too small for that. So what did I see? A cryptid? An unknown animal? Whatever it was, it felt like a glimpse into the extraordinary, something out of time and place. A few years ago in South Alabama, I lived right across from dense woods. I loved walking there. It was beautiful, but something always felt off. There were no birds, just an eerie silence. After a month of exploring, I found a spot with 4 trees overlooking a drop-off. One day, I noticed old, rusted signs on those trees, but they were unreadable. Why only there? Who could see me? That alone freaked me out enough to stop going back. Then, one night, around midnight, my girlfriend and I heard screaming from the woods. It was so loud, we thought it was right outside. We flipped on the porch light, but there was no one there. As we stepped out, the screams intensified, multiple voices, haunting and blood-curdling. It sounded human yet inhuman at the same time. I considered it could be foxes or bobcats, but I knew those sounds. To this day, I have no idea what it was, but I'm done with the woods.
I was deployed on the Eisenhower back in 2020.
We spent about 8 months at sea, with no chance to hit any ports. It was June when we were crossing the Mediterranean between Greece and Italy. One night, I stepped out for a smoke, just me and another sailor I didn't know, a green shirt from Air. As I was halfway through my cigarette, I heard this beautiful singing, harmonizing out towards the water. It couldn't have been the other guy. He was a big dude with a deep voice. We both felt this strange pull to look over at the water, but all we could see was darkness. Then we heard splashing, like someone swimming out there. It was around midnight, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we might have encountered a siren. It's one of my favorite stories to share about my time in service.
I was trying to sleep in a camper van with my boyfriend deep in the woods of Tennessee back in the 80s. We parked on an old logging road, settled into our sleeping bags, and then we heard these bizarre noises. At first, I thought it was tropical birds, really loud ones, but then it morphed into something that sounded like monkeys. It was unnerving, and it felt like they were surrounding us. My boyfriend, usually fearless, suddenly jumped into the driver's seat and floored it over the ruts in the dirt road. It didn't make sense until years later when I started listening to Bigfoot podcasts. Turns out there have been sightings in that area. I think we stumbled into a hunt, and they were trying to scare us off. Occam's razor tells me there weren't exotic birds turning into apes in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I never saw them, but the sounds matched recordings from the Sierra Sounds. No prankster could be that loud and fast in the dark. It left a lasting impression on me, especially seeing my daredevil boyfriend so rattled. Living in NT Australia during the wet season means everything's muddy, so I took my quad bike out for some fun. As I was heading home just before dark, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. I stopped and saw this massive creature that looked like a mix between a hyena and a dog. It was standing tall, chest out like a pit bull, and I swear it looked like it was sizing me up for dinner. I didn't stick around to find out, hit the throttle, and raced home. Then there was this other time fishing with my mate down by the creek. We know crocs are lurking, so we always keep a safe distance from the water. Suddenly, I felt the ground vibrate and heard this deep growl. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make us both freeze. I turned to my mate, who was about 20 meters away, and asked if he heard that. He said, "I felt it," and started backing away toward the car. We didn't stick around to find out if it was a croc or an earth tremor. Better safe than sorry, right?
Having to go camping. Just crossed the Mackinac Bridge into Michigan's Upper Peninsula when the storm hit. It was pouring buckets, the kind of rain that makes you squint to see the road. As I drove up a hill, my daughter and I spotted what we thought was a man standing in the middle of the road. Visibility was terrible, but we both saw it clearly. Then, as we got closer, it turned and I realized it was a huge black dog, almost wolf-like. I've seen a lot of dogs in my line of work, but this one was intimidating. I stopped to help, hoping someone else would take charge since my truck was packed for camping. The dog kept glancing between me and a guy in a truck across the road. I was repeating, "Don't pick me," in my head because I didn't want a giant, strange dog next to my daughter. Then the guy called, "Here, boy," and the dog ran to him. Relief washed over me as I got back on the road, but my daughter and I were both puzzled. How did we both mistake a dog for a man? It was a strange moment, one that left us questioning what we really saw. In the 79s, I was just 11, left alone with my 14-year-old brother in East Tennessee for a week. One day, while I was in the kitchen getting a drink, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. About 10 feet from the window, there it was, walking on two legs, towering at least 7 feet tall. It looked like a massive Tasmanian devil, with short arms and claws, heading toward the chicken house. We'd lost chickens before, just piles of feathers left behind. When I told my parents, they believed me. They knew I wouldn't lie. My grandmother even mentioned that my great-grandmother had seen it too, stalking in the woods, always just out of sight. It was eerie, like being watched, and I knew what I saw was real. My dad and grandpa have this wild story about seeing what they call ABCs in the woods of Kentucky, specifically in the mountains. They're convinced it's an alien big cat, and they claim to have spotted them multiple times. Grandpa even took photos of one with its cubs. He showed those pictures to the police to prove that non-native cats are roaming around Kentucky, but the feds just brushed it off. I can't help but wonder if they misidentified something, like a native big cat, or if they're just spinning a tale. I doubt they're lying. They're not the type to make things up. I'm definitely going to ask Grandpa for those photos. It's a mystery that's just too intriguing to ignore. Night, I went camping in the woods with friends, and we decided to tell ghost stories around the fire. As the tales got darker, one friend mentioned the Mokombembe, a dinosaur-like creature said to inhabit the Congo River. Intrigued, we started sharing our own cryptid encounters. I recounted a time when I was hiking alone and heard rustling in the bushes. My heart raced as I turned, convinced I'd see something extraordinary. Instead, it was just a deer. But the thrill of the unknown kept me on edge. Later, we heard a strange howl echoing through the trees. We all froze, eyes wide, imagining what could be lurking just out of sight. That night, we didn't sleep much, but the stories we shared made it unforgettable. Cryptids may be elusive, but the excitement they bring is all too real. One night, unable to sleep, I saw a tall figure in a brown jacket and hat gliding toward me. I screamed for my parents, but they dismissed it as a nightmare. This happened multiple times, and eventually, my mom started to believe me. When we moved to the second floor, the scariest encounter hit. Lying in bed, I heard a voice, distorted and backward, coming from our closet. My brother heard it too. The door handle shook violently before the door swung open, but nothing was there. Then, a white cloud shot under our futon. Over time, the door would slam on its own, and my friends witnessed it too. My mom finally believed when she heard something run across the room while we were watching a movie. I often heard a little girl's voice, even felt her whisper high in my ear. We theorized that an old baseball bat from 1901 was the source of the hauntings. After moving out, the Hat Man followed me into adulthood. The last time I saw him, he stood at the foot of my bed with two children dressed in old-fashioned clothes. One was the girl who said hi. Then, just like that, they vanished.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.